Hello and welcome back to this top 85 games for the BBC Micro Countdown. In at number 78 is a game called Cowboy Shootout. Now this game was released by Program Power in 1983, came on cassette, and you can see an example of it there. And this was a game that was actually inspired by a 1977 arcade cabinet game released by Midway, which was called Boot Hill. Although, interestingly, in Japan, where it came out under the Taito label, it was known as Gunman. Now, the premise of the game is fairly simple. You control a cowboy on the left-hand side of the screen if you're player one, or if you're player two on the right-hand side, and you have a set number of lives, and you have to shoot out your opponent before he shoots at you. And obviously, when your lives run out, you die, and that's pretty much the end of the game. And you can just keep on playing on a loop. So yes, this is the stage where we've reached in the countdown where games are no longer simply clones of existing arcade games. The BBC Micro and also the ZX Spectrum, which was a competitor machine around at the same time, they started releasing games that were, as I say, inspired by other games, but not necessarily direct carbon copy clones. And this Cowboy Shootout is an example. And in fact, the ZX Spectrum also had a game called Cowboy Shootout, very, very similar to this one, with slightly different graphics, but more or less the same game in style and gameplay. So let's dive in. Okay, here we go. Cowboy Shootout. There you go. You've got nice program power. Interestingly enough, also micro power going around the edge. I did notice when I was looking for some screenshots of the original packaging that it kind of invariably would be both program power or micro power. So not quite sure what the story is there. Perhaps if you do know, please do drop me a comment below. But anyway, I'm going to say that it came from program power because that's what was on the front cover of the version I had. Welcome to the Wild West, etc., etc. We continue to load, we get a lovely little bit of intro game music with the splash screen. I'll just shut up and let you listen to it. Isn't that amazing? I like how the sign bleeds as well. Not quite sure what the sign's made from, but there you go. So now we're into the game. There's a little bit of instructions here that you press shift if you want to restart after you or the computer dies. This game does allow for 1 and 2 player modes. I'm only going to be doing the 1 player mode, obviously, which means I'll be playing against the computer. Interestingly, the Beeb for some reason switches player 1 and player 2 around. So in the original Boot Hill game, I think player 1 was actually on the right-hand side rather than the left, but that's obviously just the way that they decided to create this game. It was, after all, inspired. So how many players? We're going to go with 1, and we are going to set the difficulty level. Well, I'm going to start with about 2, just so that we actually manage to potentially complete a few goes, and then I'll switch it to a slightly higher difficulty, and you'll see that it makes quite a big difference. Okay, so as the human player, you get to initiate the game. So this is your starting position. If I press shift, the game begins. And there we go. That's 1. He's got 3 left. Oh, hit him again. Okay, that is a fairly easy difficulty setting. Oh no, he's managed to get me too. Now you've got these carriages and cacti in the middle. If you hit the carriages, the bullet doesn't tend to go through, but with the cacti, if you manage to blow a hole through it, you can then shoot through the cactus, a little bit like the barriers in Space Invaders. There we go. Now, isn't that rather special? This game actually, believe it or not, introduced me to the Death March. That's when I very first heard it, and I didn't realise at the time that it was actually a fairly famous tune. I just thought it was made for Cowboy Shootout. But there you go. Let's have another bash. I think it's rather good actually. I mean, BBC micro games are not generally renowned for their sound and music, largely because of the memory constraints. If you wanted to produce a game with music in it, then you tended to have to compromise on the graphics, and then obviously you ended up with a game that sounded good but didn't necessarily look very good. So you don't tend to find that many examples of amazing music. There are obviously some. but a lot of them can be fairly silent and maybe just have a few bleeps and bips along the way. But I do like how Cowboy Shootout manages to combine, some fairly decent music effects, including the intro music as well, along with, a game that doesn't look too bad. I mean, we're well past the stage of graphics just looking like blocks now. We've got properly illustrated cowboys here, and cacti and little caravans going up and down. And yeah, it's a good game actually. I mean, I probably need to give a restart now because the difficulty setting is rather easy, even for me. So just let that play out, and I think if I press escape, yes, we can reset. So let's go one player again, and well, let's crank it up to 10 and just see how difficult it is. All right. Okay, well, I'm one life down already. Now, when you play on this setting, he doesn't tend to follow you unless there's a caravan in the way, and which makes it quite hard to get in his line of sight. Get him in the line of sight, I should say. Blast into those caravans there. Oh, I'm not even sure if I'm going to get one hit on him at this point. Gosh, he really is fairly trigger happy, but he's been playing. Oh dear, I was going to say he's playing a fairly defensive game. Oh, there we go. He doesn't like to follow me too closely. He likes to have the barriers of those caravans. Now, I said this about Space Invaders. You can't fire your gun until your bullet hits the other side of the screen. So you want to really get in there. You've got to try and be a bit more accurate. Not making this at all easy. I don't know if I'm going to get much more than one hit. If I get too close, he'll just shoot me. Oh, there we go. Oh, well, my turn to rest in peace. Look, I managed to hit him once. I do quite like those little death graphics, actually. I like how they've got the hat and the gun falling off as he falls backwards. That's quite cool. So yeah, I think there's been quite a lot of thought that's gone into this game. And bear in mind, this was also a game that came on cassette. So, cassette games had the disadvantage of needing to basically load everything into memory in one go, which could often take quite a while. You'd be looking at a good 20 minutes or so in most cases. And then once it was loaded, obviously the game was just there in memory and play it. So, the fact that they managed to squeeze all of this into memory without having any disk loads to pick up new information, I think it plays pretty well. Fairly fast. There's definitely some assembly code going on here. I think this isn't one of those games done purely as basic. I don't think. Got some good colours. I mean, they picked out a good. Look at him go. They picked out a good colour scheme here. They've got the yellow for the desert sand. Somewhere in Nevada or somewhere like that, I suspect. Maybe New Mexico. Texas, perhaps? Actually, yeah, probably more likely Texas, isn't it? Oh, yeah. I'll only manage to hit him once. But yeah, I think very well put together game, actually. And I do like it. I mean, I have, fond memories of playing this one. I did sometimes play it on two-player mode with my dad on occasion. I think I played with my cousins a couple of times, and school friends too. But generally speaking, I tended to play it by myself. Yeah, that rest in peace never gets old, does it? That's, although the balance has definitely changed with it being on my side of the screen. Oh dear. Ooh. Yeah, it's really tricky because if you get one hit in, I was gonna say if you get a hit in, then hello. Bottom of the screen is clearly the place to get him. It's because that caravan was shielding. Now look, see, he's following the caravan. Oh, am I going to get him in hard mode? I mean, this would be quite an achievement for me, believe me. I'm not probably picked up from some of the other videos. I'm not the world's best game player. I enjoy games, but I don't generally have the patience to get really good at games. I tend to find that after a while I just get a bit bored and move on to something else. Hey. am I going to last? I mean, I've got a few lives to spare here, so maybe I should be a bit more bold. There we go. Look at that. Beat him on difficulty 10. There you go. I'm impressed with myself. So yeah, I mean, I think there's probably not a lot more to say about Cowboy Shootout, really. It's you know, it's a good fun game, fairly straightforward gameplay, and yeah, it's a worthy entry at number 78. Well done to Micropower for this one. I think it's a pretty decent game. And it's nice to sort of start playing games that, although, yes, they have their inspiration in sort of well-known arcade classics, this isn't a copy. If you do play Boot Hill, you'll see that it, you know, graphically speaking, is a bit different. Actually, the gameplay is also a little bit different too, because I think with the arcade cabinet, you could position the gun as well as move the cowboy. So this one's a bit more straightforward. But those moving caravans in the middle, I think, are a nice touch. You know, it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to duck, get out of the way, but also equally makes it a little bit harder to kill your opponent at the same time. Oh dear. Oh no. Well, I think that's probably the signal to call it a day. At least I managed to beat the computer once on this difficulty setting. But as you can appreciate, the game just keeps on looping. I don't think it ever stops. I can remember playing it for at least a good hour or so as a kid, and yeah, I think it just kept on going. No Hall of Fame, sadly, so you know you won't ever get to record how many times you managed to beat the computer. But you know it's a straightforward game, and there's not really point scoring involved. It's more about just having a good time and killing your opponent. So, yep, in at 78, Cowboy Shootout, inspired by Boot Hill. Hope you enjoyed that one. I certainly did. And join me next time for game 77.